Part 1. She thought he was a nobody, he was the true alpha. The forest knew his name before she did. It whispered it through the trembling leaves, hummed it in the roots that curled away from his path, sang it in the sudden silence of every creature that sensed him passing. The ancient pines bowed slightly, not from wind but from instinct, the same instinct that made wolves lower their heads, and even the moon seemed to pause its climb when he walked beneath its silver gaze. But Lily didn't know any of this as she crouched behind the fallen oak, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird, blood drying sticky on her palms from the climb. She only knew that something was wrong. Terribly, impossibly wrong. The night air tasted of ozone and burnt sugar, a combination that made her wolf stir restlessly beneath her skin, hackles rising in a phantom sensation that shivered down her human spine. She'd been tracking the rogue scent for 3 miles, certain she was closing in on a threat to her pack's eastern border, certain she was proving herself worthy of the rank she craved. Instead, she'd found this. The clearing ahead shouldn't exist. She'd run these woods since she was old enough to shift, knew every twisted root and hidden stream within 50 miles of Blackwood territory. But here, where there should have been nothing but dense thicket and blackberry brambles, the trees had parted like stage curtains to reveal a space that felt older, wrong in a way that made her teeth ache and her instincts scream at her to run, run, run. But Lily Hart didn't run. Not from rogues. Not from threats. Not from anything that might finally make her alpha see her as more than the orphan niece he'd taken in out of obligation rather than love. So she stayed. She watched. And she tried to understand why the man standing in the center of that impossible clearing made every survival instinct she possessed shriek in conflicting directions. He wasn't large. That was her first thought, and it stuck like a burr because everything in werewolf culture taught that size meant strength, that presence demanded space, that power took up room. But this man, this stranger with the dark hair falling past his shoulders and the clothes that looked like they'd been scavenged from a century past, he occupied the clearing like smoke, like shadow, like something that had always been there and simply chose in this moment to be seen. He was facing away from her, head tilted toward the sky where the moon hung bloated and watchful, 3 nights from full. His shoulders moved with slow, deliberate breaths, and Lily caught the faint scent of pine and cold stone and something else, something that made her mouth water and her wolf whine in confused longing. Not pack, her instincts insisted. Not rogue. Not anything in the taxonomy of scent she'd been trained to identify. "You're bleeding on my threshold, little wolf." The voice didn't startle her because it didn't seem to come from anywhere. It simply was, filling the clearing like mist, brushing against her skin with a physical presence that made her gasp. She jerked back, her shoulder blades hitting rough bark, but when she looked again he hadn't moved. Still facing the moon. Still breathing that slow, impossible rhythm. Her voice came out rough, human, frustratingly weak. Lily cleared her throat and tried again, forcing her wolf closer to the surface, letting the amber bleed into her eyes until the night sharpened into edges of gold and silver. "I'm tracking a rogue. You're trespassing on Blackwood Pack land." A pause. Then the softest sound, almost a laugh, almost a sigh. "Am I?" He turned, and Lily forgot how to breathe. His eyes were the color of storm clouds over winter fields, gray and depthless and ancient in a face that couldn't have seen more than 30 winters. But it wasn't the age in his gaze that froze her. It was the lack of anything she understood. No dominance challenge. No submission. No recognition of the power she carefully cultivated. The rank she'd fought for. The status that defined every interaction in her world. He looked at her like she was interesting. Like she was a curiosity. Like the blood on her hands and the fear she couldn't quite suppress and the desperate ambition that drove her every waking moment were all laid bare for his casual observation. "You're not afraid," he said. "Not a question. I don't fear rogues." She straightened, stepping out from behind the oak despite every instinct shrieking that this was a mistake. Her wolf was pacing, circling, confused, wanting to bare throat and bristle and run all at once. "And you're clearly alone without pack scent. That makes you either rogue or omega, and neither warrants fear from a Blackwood hunter." The words tasted like ash. She'd been taught better than to taunt unknown threats, to reveal her pack affiliation so carelessly. But something about his absolute stillness, his complete lack of reaction to her posturing, scraped against her pride like sandpaper. She wanted a reaction. Needed one. She got a smile. It was small, barely a quirk of his lips, but it transformed his face from unsettlingly beautiful to something that punched straight through her chest. Not because it was warm, there was nothing warm in that expression, but because it was knowing. Like he could see every insecurity she buried under layers of competence and ambition. Like he understood exactly why she was here, alone, chasing phantom rogues into the deep woods instead of accepting her place in the pack hierarchy. "Blackwood," he repeated, tasting the word. Elias Blackwood's territory. The alpha who took in his dead sister's cub and raised her to be useful rather than loved. The alpha who sees your skill and fears it, who keeps you close enough to control and far enough to never threaten his precious son's inheritance. Lily's blood went cold. How do you? I know many things, Lily Hart. He took a step toward her, and the forest held its breath. I know that you climbed that ridge thinking you'd found a rogue's trail, not realizing the scent was a lure. I know that your palms are cut from the quartz outcropping you scaled rather than taking the longer path, because you always choose the difficult way when no one's watching. I know that you dream of being seen, truly seen, by someone powerful enough to matter. Another step. The distance between them halved, and Lily found she couldn't move, couldn't shift, couldn't do anything but stare into those storm gray eyes and feel something inside her crack open like a geode, sharp and glittering and terrifyingly exposed. But most importantly, little wolf, he continued, his voice dropping to something that vibrated in her sternum, in her bones, in the very core of her wolf who had gone absolutely perfectly still. I know that in 3 days, when the moon turns full and your pack gathers for the mating run, everything you believe about power and rank and what makes an alpha worthy of the name will be tested. And you will fail. The words should have enraged her. Should have triggered every defensive mechanism she'd built over years of proving herself, in a world that valued bloodlines over merit. Instead, she felt tears prick her eyes, humiliating, hot, and hated him for it. Who are you? She whispered. He was close enough now that she could see the scar tracing his jaw, silver against tan skin. Close enough to touch, though the thought made her wolf whine in distress. Close enough that when he reached out, slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, his fingers brushing the blood on her palm felt like a brand. Right now. His thumb traced the worst of the cuts, and healing warmth flooded through her, shocking and intimate and wrong because she hadn't given permission, because no one could heal without a pack bond, because, right now, Lily, I'm nobody. His eyes caught the moonlight and held it, silver bleeding into gray until they seemed to glow with their own luminescence. But in 3 days, when your world burns and your alpha falls and you stand in the ashes wondering why the strongest among you couldn't stop the fire. He released her hand, stepped back, and seemed to fade into the shadows even as she watched. Remember that you had the chance to see me, and you chose to see nothing. The clearing was empty. Not empty like he'd walked away. Empty like he'd never been there at all. The trees pressed close again, normal and mundane and smelling only of pine and damp earth. The moon continued its climb, indifferent. Even the blood on her palms had vanished, healed without trace except for the phantom warmth where his fingers had touched. Lily stood alone in the dark, trembling, her wolf howling inside her with a sound that might have been warning, or might have been mourning. She didn't tell anyone about the man in the clearing. Not that night, stumbling back to Packlands with her mind reeling and her instincts in chaos. Not the next morning, when her uncle Elias called her to his study and praised her patrol work with the distant approval he gave a useful tool. Not even to her closest friend Mara, who noticed the shadows under her eyes and the way she started at sudden sounds. He's nobody, she told herself, running the words like a mantra through her mind as the full moon crept closer, and the pack's excitement for the mating run built to a fever pitch. A hermit. A crazy lone wolf with some parlor tricks and too much knowledge. Not a threat. Not anything. But at night, when sleep finally came, she dreamed of storm-gray eyes and a voice that made the forest bow. She dreamed of healing warmth and words that cut deeper than claws. She dreamed of standing in ashes while something ancient and terrible watched from the smoke, and woke with her heart racing and her sheets tangled and the taste of pine and cold stone on her tongue. 3 days. The mating run was sacred tradition. The night when unattached wolves ran under the full moon and let instinct guide them toward potential mates. For Lily, it had always represented everything she wanted and everything she feared. The chance to be chosen, to be valued, to finally secure a place in the pack that couldn't be taken from her. And the terror that no one would want the orphan niece, the too fierce hunter, the female who refused to soften her edges to attract a dominant male. She'd prepared for this run for months. Trained harder, ran farther, honed her wolf until her fur gleamed like polished mahogany, and her speed made even the pack's best trackers struggle to match her. And now, with the moon rising full and silver over Blackwood territory, she stood at the starting line surrounded by the pack's eligible males and felt only hollow. Nervous. She turned to find Caleb, the alpha's son, watching her with the lazy confidence of someone who'd never questioned his place in the world. He was beautiful, everyone said so, with his golden hair and easy smile and the dominant aura that made lesser wolves instinctively step aside. He was also, she'd slowly realized, cruel in the way of the truly privileged, taking what he wanted because he'd never been taught that denial existed. Excited, she corrected, forcing her lips into the shape of a smile. I've been looking forward to this. His eyes traveled over her with assessment rather than appreciation. My father thinks you'll make someone a fine mate. Useful skills, strong bloodline despite the circumstances of your birth. Pity about your personality, but some males prefer a challenge. The words slid off her like water off oil. She'd spent years building armor against Caleb's casual barbs, against the way he reminded her at every opportunity that she existed in this pack on sufferance, that her mother had been the beloved daughter while Lily was merely the orphaned burden. And you, Caleb? She let her wolf rise just enough to meet his gaze without flinching, that small rebellion that always made his eyes narrow. What are you looking for tonight? Someone who'll bow pretty enough not to threaten your inevitable ascension. For a moment, something dark flickered in his expression. Then the smile returned sharper. Careful, cousin. You're not mated yet. And accidents happen in the run. Wolves get carried away. Instincts override sense. He leaned closer, his breath hot against her ear. Wouldn't want you damaged goods before you even have a chance to disappoint someone. He moved away before she could respond, joining the cluster of high-ranking males who laughed at his jokes and mirrored his posture. Lily stood alone, as she always stood alone, and wondered why the thought of running tonight filled her with dread rather than anticipation. The horn sounded, her uncle's signal, ancient and bone-deep in its resonance. Around her, wolves began to shift, clothing tearing and falling away as bodies flowed into fur and fang. The air filled with the electric crackle of transformation, with the wild joy of wolves freed from human constraint. Lily let her own shift take her, welcomed the familiar pain of bones rearranging, of senses exploding into hyper-awareness. Her wolf surged forward with unusual eagerness, as if she'd been waiting for this, needing this, and for a moment Lily lost herself in the pure animal joy of being strong and fast and free. Then the wind shifted, carrying a scent that stopped her heart. Pine and cold stone and something else, something that made her wolf freeze with her paws still touching earth, her nose lifted to the sky, every fiber of her being focused on the impossible. He's here. The thought didn't feel like hers. It felt older, deeper, rising from places in her consciousness that had nothing to do with logic or experience. Her wolf knew that scent, recognized it with a certainty that bypassed memory entirely, and the sound that tore from her throat was half howl, half whine, completely involuntary. Other wolves noticed. She felt their attention shift, felt Caleb's golden-furred form pause in his predatory prowl toward a delicate gray female. Felt her uncle, still in human form on the observation platform, go suddenly still. But she couldn't care about any of it. Because at the edge of the clearing, where the forest began its dark descent into the deep woods, a wolf stood watching. He shouldn't have been visible. The shadows there were absolute, the moonlight failing to penetrate the dense canopy. But she saw him clearly, saw the charcoal fur that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, saw the eyes that glowed silver gray with an inner luminescence that had nothing to do with moon reflection. He was larger than he should be. Larger than any wolf she'd seen, even her uncle in his prime. But size wasn't what made the other wolves begin to whimper, to back away, to press against each other in sudden, inexplicable fear. It was the absence. No pack scent. No rank markers. No submission, no challenge, no recognition of the complex social signals that governed every interaction in their world. He simply was, a presence that defied categorization. And when his gaze locked with Lily's, she felt something inside her snap into place with an audible click that resonated through her entire being. Run, her human mind urged. The memory of his warning clear as crystal. Run now, run fast, run far. Her wolf sprang forward. Not away. Toward. She heard Caleb snarl. Heard her uncle shout something in human words that meant nothing to her animal mind. Heard the chaos of wolves scattering as she tore past them with single-minded intensity. The charcoal wolf didn't move, didn't react, simply watched her approach with those impossible eyes and waited. 50 yards. 20. 10. She could see him clearly now. See the scars that mapped his hide, the way his fur moved like smoke even in still air, the absolute certainty in his posture that whatever happened next, he would remain unchanged by it. 5 yards. He turned. And ran. Not from her. She understood that instantly, felt it in the way his pace matched hers perfectly, the way he led her through paths that seemed to open before him like welcoming arms. He was guiding her, testing her, and her wolf answered with joy rather than offense, stretching into speed she'd never achieved, reveling in the chase for its own sake. They ran until the sounds of the mating run faded behind them, until Blackwood territory gave way to the neutral lands that no pack claimed, until the trees grew ancient and strange and the air itself seemed to thicken with power that made her fur stand on end. He stopped at the base of a mountain she didn't recognize. A peak that shouldn't exist in this landscape, jagged and snow-capped and humming with energy that made her teeth ache. When he turned to face her, the shift took him smoothly, fur flowing into skin without the usual signs of struggle, until the man from the clearing stood before her in the moonlight, more beautiful and more terrible than her memory allowed. "You're here," he said, and something in his voice, surprise, satisfaction, made her wolf preen even as her human mind raged at her lack of control. Lily forced her own shift, gasping at the sudden cold against her bare skin, at the vulnerability of standing human before this stranger who wore his nakedness like armor. "You knew I would be. I hoped." He took a step closer, and she saw that his eyes were different now, still gray, still ancient, but with something burning in their depths that hadn't been there before. Hunger. Recognition. Need. "I hoped, Lily Hart. But I didn't dare believe. Believe what? She should run. Should shift and flee and pretend this night had never happened. But her feet wouldn't move and her heart wouldn't slow, and when he reached out to brush a strand of hair from her face, his touch sent lightning through her veins. That the bond would be true. His voice had dropped to a whisper, intimate and devastating. That after all these years of waiting, of hiding, of being nobody, the moon would finally send me someone who could see. See what? The question barely audible, trembling on lips that wanted other things, other words. He smiled then, and it was nothing like the knowing expression from the clearing. This was raw, vulnerable. The smile of a man who had carried alone a burden too heavy for any single soul. Me, he whispered. The real me. Not the nobody. Not the hermit. Not the ghost stories packs tell their pups to keep them from wandering too far. His hand moved to her cheek, cradling her face with a gentleness that made her eyes burn with tears she refused to shed. The true alpha, Lily. Last of my kind. Guardian of a power that could remake or unmake everything your world understands about dominance and submission. His thumb traced her cheekbone, and she felt the truth of his words in her bones, in her blood, in the wolf inside her who had gone perfectly, worshipfully still. And I'm dying. The word hung between them like a blade. The power burns too hot, too long, with no pack to ground it, no mate to balance it. I've survived centuries by hiding, by diminishing myself, by being less than I am. His eyes searched hers with desperate intensity. But tonight, when you ran toward me instead of away, for the first time in longer than I can remember, I felt hope. Lily's mind reeled, caught between instinct and intellect, between the pull she couldn't deny and the impossibility of what he claimed. Centuries. True alpha. A power that could unmake worlds. And yet, you said I would fail, she managed, clutching to the one solid thing in a sea of chaos. In 3 days when the world burns, you said I would fail. Because you will. He didn't flinch from her gaze. If you go back to your pack, if you accept the place they offer, the mate they choose, the life that diminishes you to make others comfortable. His other hand rose to frame her face, holding her with desperate gentleness. But if you stay, if you choose this, choose me, choose a path that has no precedent and no safety. He paused and she saw the fear in him then, real fear, ancient and heavy, from a being who had known too much loss. Then we might both survive what comes. And we might, against every probability, find something that makes the survival worthwhile. The mountain hummed around them. The moon watched, patient and eternal. And Lily stood at the crossroads of every life she'd imagined and one she couldn't have conceived, feeling the weight of a choice that would define not just her future, but perhaps the future of every wolf she'd ever known. Behind her, Blackwood territory waited with its familiar constraints and conditional acceptance. Before her, a stranger who claimed to be legend made flesh offered nothing but truth and the possibility of ruin. Her wolf knew the answer. Had known perhaps from the moment she'd caught his scent in the impossible clearing. But Lily Hart had spent her whole life being cautious, being practical, being smart about which battles to fight and which to surrender. The habit of self-preservation didn't dissolve simply because a beautiful man with ancient eyes asked her to believe in fairy tales. I don't even know your name, she whispered. He laughed, surprised, and the sound warmed something frozen deep in her chest. Zane. My name is Zane. And I know that's not enough. Not nearly enough for what I'm asking. But Lily. He leaned closer until his forehead rested against hers, until their breath mingled in the cold mountain air. I don't have time to court you properly. I don't have time to earn your trust or prove my claims. The full moon tonight isn't just your mating run. It's the convergence that happens once every 5 centuries, when the barriers between what is and what could be grow thin. He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes, and she saw the urgency there, the desperation barely contained. Something is coming. Something that has hunted my kind to extinction, that will not rest until the last true alpha is destroyed. I've hidden from it for so long, become so small, that I can barely defend myself anymore. His grip tightened almost painfully. But with you, with a mate, with the bond that I feel crackling between us even now, I could be strong enough. I could fight. I could live. The word broke on the last syllable, raw and young and nothing like the ancient being he claimed to be. Or, he continued, releasing her and stepping back, you can return to your pack. Forget this night. Marry some dominant male who'll value your utility and tolerate your spirit. And in 3 days when the fire comes, I'll die as I've lived. Alone, unmourned, and ultimately forgotten. He turned away, presenting his back to her. A gesture of trust so absolute it stole her breath. The mountain's humming grew louder, or perhaps that was her own blood rushing in her ears, her heart pounding out the rhythm of a choice that couldn't be unmade. Choose quickly, Lily. The moon waits for no one. And neither do I. She stared at his back, at the scars that mapped his skin like a history written in pain, at the way his shoulders tensed with the effort of not turning around, not pressuring, not taking what he so clearly wanted with every fiber of his being. He's nobody, she told herself one last time. The words hollow even in her own mind. But he wasn't. He was possibility and danger and the terrifying promise of being truly seen. He was everything she'd ever wanted and everything she'd learned to fear. And he was waiting. Part 2. The mountain had a name, though Zane spoke it only once, in a language that made Lily's ears ring and her wolf press against her consciousness with whining urgency. Threnodix, he called it. The Weeping Stone. A place where the earth itself remembered what the world had forgotten. They didn't speak on the climb. The path, if it could be called a path, wound upward through terrain that seemed to shift when she wasn't looking directly at it. Boulders became staircases. Crevices became doorways. The air grew thinner but somehow easier to breathe, charged with an energy that made her skin tingle, and her heart race with exhilaration rather than fear. Zane moved ahead of her, his bare back a map of scars she was only now beginning to truly see. Not the random marks of battle she realized, but patterns. Deliberate. Ritualistic. Some glowed faintly silver in the moonlight, matching the luminescence of his eyes, and she understood with sudden, visceral certainty that each one represented a price paid, a power bound, a piece of his true nature locked away for survival. "You're staring," he said without turning around. "You're not wearing clothes." A laugh low and genuine. Werewolves are rarely modest. Has Blackwood Pack grown so civilized that nudity shocks you? It's not the nudity. She paused, choosing honesty because the mountain seemed to demand it, to strip away pretense as easily as it had stripped away the path behind them. It's the marks. They tell a story, but I can't read the language. He stopped then, on a ledge that opened onto a view that stole her breath. The world spread below them, not just Blackwood territory, but everything, stretching to horizons that shouldn't have been visible from any earthly elevation. She saw forests and rivers and cities glowing with electric light, saw the curve of the earth itself, and somewhere in the distance, she thought she saw other mountains like this one, humming with similar power, forming a network of ancient sentinels across the globe. "The story," Zane said, his voice heavy with memory, "is of a boy who didn't ask to be born special, who watched his entire bloodline hunted to extinction before he understood why, who learned to hide not just from enemies, but from friends, from potential mates, from anyone who might see what he was and either fear him or try to use him." He turned to face her, and the moonlight caught him perfectly, every scar, every line of suffering, every vestige of impossible age in his young face. "I am the last true alpha, Lily. The last of a lineage that predates pack structures, predates the division into dominant and submissive, predates the very concept of alpha, as your world understands it. We were the first. The origin. The template from which all other power derives." He stepped closer, and she saw the weight of centuries in his eyes. Not wisdom, not peace, but exhaustion. Bone deep, soul-weary exhaustion. And we were hunted for it. Not by rogues. Not by rival packs. By something older and hungrier that feeds on power itself. The Devourer, my kind called it. The empty. It has no form, no scent, no presence that can be tracked or fought directly. Simply consumes. Takes the essence of what we are and leaves nothing behind. No body. No memory. Just absence where once there was glory. Lily thought of her parents, dead before her first shift. The official story, rogue attack, tragic but common. The whispered rumors, something else, something that had made her uncle's face go gray when he thought she wasn't watching. "My mother," she heard herself say. "She was powerful. More powerful than my uncle, everyone said so. And she died when I was 3, along with my father. Rogues, they told me. But there were never details. Never bodies recovered. Just absence." Zane's expression shifted, something terrible and tender moving across his features. "Lily, was it the same thing?" The question tore from her throat, sharp with old grief made suddenly fresh. "Did that thing take my parents?" "I don't know." He reached for her, and she let him take her hands, let his impossible warmth anchor her in a world that was tilting beneath her feet. "I was already hiding by then, already diminished. I felt the loss. Every death of my kind sends ripples through the power that connects us, but I couldn't trace the source. I was too busy surviving to be a guardian, too busy being nobody." The confession cost him. She saw it in the way his jaw tightened, in the shame that flickered through his storm-gray eyes. "For centuries, I've told myself that survival was enough. That as long as one true alpha remained, the lineage continued, the knowledge preserved. But I've been dying by inches, Lily. Every year that passes without a pack, without a mate, without the grounding connection that our kind needs to maintain our power, I fade a little more. The scars you see, they're not just from battles fought. They're from powers I've had to seal away. Abilities that became too dangerous to use because I had no one to catch me if I fell too deep into the old ways." He lifted her hands to his chest, pressing her palms against skin that was fever-warm and humming with contained energy. She felt his heartbeat, too slow, too measured, as if his body had forgotten the rhythm of mortal urgency. Tonight, when you ran toward me instead of away, I felt something wake up. Something I thought I'd killed long ago. His voice dropped to a whisper, intimate and terrified. Hope. The hope that I don't have to end as I began, alone. The hope that the last true alpha might not be the last after all. The implications crashed over her like cold water. You want me to... What? Be your mate? Bear your children? Rebuild an entire bloodline? I want... He broke off, frustration flashing across his features. I want what I've never allowed myself to want. Connection. Partnership. Someone who sees me and chooses to stay despite seeing. But I won't lie to you, Lily. The bond between true alpha and mate is not like pack matings. It's deeper. Irrevocable. It would change you. Awaken things in your bloodline that have been dormant for generations. And it would make you a target. The Devourer doesn't just hunt my kind. It hunts those we love. Those who might carry our power forward. He released her hands and stepped back, giving her space that she suddenly didn't want. I'm asking you to risk everything for a stranger who has nothing to offer but danger and ancient obligations. I'm asking you to turn your back on the life you know, the pack that raised you, the future you've planned, for the possibility of... What? A few more years of hiding? A desperate stand against an enemy that has never been defeated? He laughed, harsh and self-mocking. When I say it aloud, I wonder that you haven't already run. Lily should run. Every practical instinct, every lesson learned in a life of conditional acceptance, screamed at her to shift and flee down the mountain, to forget this night, to choose safety and certainty over impossible dreams. But she thought of Caleb's casual cruelty, of her uncle's distant approval, of every moment she'd spent proving herself worthy of a place that had never truly been hers. She thought of the mating run she'd abandoned, the dominant males who would have tolerated her strength as long as it served their ambitions, the life of perpetual compromise that awaited her return. And she thought of Zane, this impossible, ancient, exhausted man who looked at her like she mattered not for what she could do, but for who she was. Who had shown her his scars before showing her his strength. Who had offered truth when lies would have been easier. I'm not running, she said, and watched his eyes widen with something that might have been wonder. But I'm not choosing blind either. You want me to trust you? To bond with you? Then show me who you really are. Not the legend. Not the last true alpha. Show me Zane. The boy who became the man who became... this. She gestured at the mountain, at the impossible view. At the weight of centuries pressing down on them both. Show me what you're asking me to give up everything for. And then I'll decide. For a long moment he simply stared at her. Then slowly, a smile spread across his face. Not the knowing expression from the clearing. Not the desperate hope from moments before, but something new. Something young. You bargain like a true alpha's mate already, he said. And there was pride in his voice and challenge, and a warmth that made her want to step closer again. Very well, Lily Hart. You want to know me? Then know me. He turned and led her higher, to a cave that breathed warmth and smelled of herbs and old books. The interior was surprisingly domestic, furs piled for seating, shelves carved into stone walls holding objects she didn't recognize, a fire burning without fuel in a central pit that cast dancing shadows across ceiling paintings that seemed to move when viewed from the corner of her eye. This has been my home for 80 years, Zane said, gesturing at the space with something between affection and embarrassment. The longest I've stayed anywhere. I found it after the last of my kindred fell. The previous last true alpha, a female named Seraphina who held the line for 3 centuries before the Devourer finally found her weakness. He moved to a shelf, retrieving a small box carved from dark wood. She sent me this before the end. A message, a warning, and a gift, though she didn't know it at the time. He opened the box to reveal a pendant. A wolf's head carved from stone that seemed to contain the night sky, stars swirling in its depths. Seraphina was my mentor, my friend, the closest thing to family I had for 200 years. She taught me how to hide, how to diminish, how to survive when survival felt like the cruelest punishment. And in her last message, she told me something that changed everything. Lily moved closer, drawn by the beauty of the pendant, by the grief in Zane's voice that matched her own for parents she barely remembered. She said that the Devourer wasn't random, that it had been created long ago by the first true alphas themselves, a weapon meant to control our own kind, to eliminate those who grew too powerful, too dangerous. But the weapon turned on its makers, and we've been running from our own creation ever since. He lifted the pendant, and the starlight within it pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. Seraphina believed she found a way to destroy it, a mating bond so pure, so complete, that it would create a resonance capable of shattering the Devourer's formless existence. But she never found the right partner. Never found someone who could see her truly and choose to stay. His eyes met Lily's and she saw the question in them, the hope barely daring to breathe. She died believing the secret died with her. But she was wrong. She gave me the knowledge and she gave me possibility. He held out the pendant, and Lily understood that this was the moment of choice, not the dramatic declaration on the mountainside, but but this quiet offering in a cave that smelled of home. Take this and you'll feel what I feel. The bond that wants to form between us, the potential that hums in the space where our energies meet. You'll truly know what choosing me means. And if you then walk away, the pendant will let you go. No compulsion. No consequence. Just knowledge and the freedom to choose with full understanding. Lily looked at the pendant, at the stars swirling in stone, at the man offering her the most terrifying gift she'd ever received, the truth of her own heart. And if I stay? She asked, though she already knew the answer. Zane's smile was sunrise breaking over winter fields. Then we begin. Together. And whatever comes, we face it as one. She reached for the pendant. The world dissolved. Not into darkness but into connection. She felt Zane. Not just his presence but his essence, flowing through her like a second bloodstream. She felt his loneliness, vast and ancient, and his hope fragile and new. She felt his memories, not all of them but glimpses. A childhood in a court of true alphas, golden and glorious and doomed. The first death, his mother's, when the Devourer found their hidden sanctuary. Centuries of running, hiding, diminishing himself until he could barely remember what power felt like. And she felt his feelings for her. Not the instant obsession of fairy tales, but something more profound. Recognition. The sense of finally finding the piece that had been missing from his soul for longer than nations had existed. You see me, his thought whispered through the connection, gentle as breath. Truly see me. And you're still here. She wanted to respond, to tell him that she saw not just the legend but the man. The exhaustion and the courage and the desperate hope that mirrored her own. But the connection showed her something else. Something that made her heart stutter with fear. The Devourer. Not its true form, it had none but its presence. A hunger that existed outside space and time. That tracked power like scent. That was even now turning its attention toward this mountain. Drawn by the resonance of the pendant's activation. It knows. Zane's thought came urgent now. It always knows when true alphas try to form the bond. That's why Seraphina failed. She activated the resonance. But the Devourer found her before the bond could complete. How long do we have? Lily asked, and was proud that her mental voice stayed steady. Hours. Maybe less. She felt his regret, sharp and bitter. I should have warned you. Should have made you understand the risk before. You did. She pulled back from the vision, focusing on the cave, the fire, the man before her with the pendant clutched in both their hands. You told me everything that matters. That this is dangerous. That we might fail. That the cost of trying is everything. She looked into his eyes, and made her choice with full knowledge of what it cost. I'm not Seraphina, Zane. I'm not a true alpha with centuries of power to attract the Devourer's attention. I'm just me. A nobody from a pack that never fully claimed me. A female who thought she'd have to fight for every scrap of recognition for the rest of her life. She stepped closer, close enough to feel his warmth, to smell pine and cold stone and the wild scent of wolf that was uniquely his. But maybe that's enough. Maybe the bond doesn't need two legends. Maybe it just needs two people willing to see each other truly, and choose to stay despite the seeing. She rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. Not a passionate claiming but a promise. A beginning. The pendant blazed between them, starlight spilling out to wrap them both in luminescence. And for the first time in centuries, Zane's power began to truly wake. Part 3. The bond didn't complete. Lily felt it falter, felt the starlight flicker and dim, and pulled back with a gasp to find Zane pale and trembling, his eyes wide with shock and grief. No, he whispered. No, not again. What happened? She gripped his shoulders, feeling his power surge and retreat like waves against a crumbling shore. Zane, what? Interrupted. The word came from the cave entrance, and they both spun to find a figure silhouetted against the night. Sorry to break up the romance, but some of us have been looking for our missing pack member. Caleb. He stepped into the firelight, fully dressed where they were naked, his handsome face twisted with an expression Lily had never seen before. Jealousy mixed with triumph, hatred barely concealed under a veneer of concern. Behind him she sensed others, her uncle's enforcers, the pack's best trackers, waiting in the shadows with weapons silver and wolfsbane. Your uncle is worried, cousin. Caleb's smile didn't reach his eyes. You disappeared from the mating run. Abandoned your duty. Ran off with. He looked Zane up and down with deliberate insult. Whatever this is. A rogue? A hermit? Certainly not anyone of rank or importance. Leave, Zane said, and his voice carried the weight of command that had made forests bow. But Lily heard the strain in it, felt through their partial bond how much the interrupted ritual had cost him. He was weak and vulnerable and Caleb, damn him, could sense it. Or what? Caleb stepped closer, and Lily moved instinctively to place herself between him and Zane. The gesture made Caleb's eyes narrow with fury. You'll challenge me? You with no pack, no status, no claim. I claim this territory, Zane said. I claim this female. And I claim the right to challenge any who would interfere with either. The words hung in the air, Ancient formula that predated modern pack law. Caleb blinked, momentarily thrown, then laughed. Territory? This mountain has been neutral ground since before the Blackwood pack existed. And as for the female, his gaze raked over Lily with possessive fury. She's pack. My father's pack. And that means she belongs to us, not to some nameless stray who. She belongs to herself. Zane's voice was quiet, but it cut through Caleb's rant like a blade. That is the first law, older than your pack structures, older than your dominance games. Every wolf chooses. And Lily has chosen. Has she? Caleb's smile turned cruel. Or has she been manipulated? Seduced by power she doesn't understand. He looked at Lily with mock concern. He's using you, cousin. Can't you see that? Whatever he is, whatever he's promised you, it's a lie. True alphas are extinct. Have been for centuries. This creature is either deluded or deceitful. And either way, he has no place in our world. Lily felt the truth of Zane's nature humming through their partial bond. Felt his exhaustion and his hope and the ancient power stirring awake. She thought of her life in Blackwood Pack, the constant proving, the conditional acceptance, the future of compromise stretching endlessly before her. And she thought of what she'd felt in the connection, however brief. Being seen. Being chosen. Being enough not for what she could do but for who she was. I know what he is, she said, and her voice was steady. Better than you know anything, Caleb. You see rank and power and threat to your inheritance. I see. She reached back, found Zane's hand, felt his fingers close around hers with desperate gratitude. I see someone who doesn't need me to be less, so he can be more. Caleb's face darkened with rage. You stupid, ungrateful. He cut himself off, visibly forcing control. Fine. Choose your hermit. But know this, Lily. If you leave with him, you're dead to the pack. No protection. No territory. No family. And when he abandons you or dies or proves to be the nothing he appears to be, there will be no coming back. He turned to Zane and his smile was all teeth. As for you, the Alpha has declared you rogue, a threat to pack security. You have until dawn to leave Blackwood territory, or we will hunt you. He leaned closer, dropping his voice to a whisper that Lily's enhanced hearing caught clearly. And we will find you. We always find them in the end. The special ones. The different ones. The ones who think they're above pack law. There was something in his words, a weight of knowledge that didn't match his years, that made Zane go still with sudden understanding. You know, Zane said, and it wasn't a question. About the Devourer. About what hunts in the dark beyond pack law. Caleb's expression flickered, surprise quickly hidden. Then a smugness that made Lily's blood run cold. I know that power has a price. And I know that some prices are too high to pay for the likes of her. He gestured at Lily with contempt. She thinks she's special. Thinks she's chosen. But she's just bait. Always was. The pretty lure that draws the big fish into open water. He turned and walked toward the entrance, pausing at the threshold to look back. Dawn, Hermit. Or the hunt begins. And he was gone, his enforcers melting away with him, leaving Lily and Zane alone with the shattered remnants of their interrupted bond, and the weight of revelations too terrible to process. He knows, Lily whispered. Caleb knows about the Devourer. About me. What did he mean, bait? Zane's grip on her hand tightened painfully. Your parents, he said, and his voice was hollow. I should have seen it. Should have recognized the pattern. The Devourer doesn't just hunt randomly. It uses tools. Puppets. Wolves who've traded loyalty for power, who feed it information in exchange for. He shook his head. Your uncle, Caleb. They've been serving it for years. That's why your parents died. Why you were kept alive. You were meant to be insurance. A backup plan. If another true alpha ever surfaced, what better lure than the orphan daughter of their previous victims? The words hit like physical blows. Lily stumbled back, releasing Zane's hand, her mind reeling. Her uncle, distant, demanding, but ultimately the only family she had, was a servant of the thing that killed her parents? Her entire life in Blackwood Pack had been carefully orchestrated, not out of obligation but as a trap? I don't believe you, she said, but the words lacked conviction. Too many small memories suddenly made terrible sense. Her uncle's insistence on her training in specific areas, his careful control of her relationships, the way he'd encouraged her ambition while ensuring she never actually achieved enough to threaten Caleb's position. Believe what you need to, Zane said softly. But we don't have time for denial. The bond is incomplete. We need to finish the ritual before the Devourer arrives. Or we'll both be too weak to fight. And we can't do it here. Caleb will return with more forces, or worse, he'll call the Devourer directly. He moved to the back of the cave, pressing his palm against a section of wall that shimmered and dissolved, revealing a tunnel that sloped downward into darkness. There's a place below. A sanctuary created by the first true alphas, hidden even from those who know this mountain exists. We can complete the bond there. Gain enough power to survive what's coming. He looked at her, and she saw the fear he tried to hide. But it's your choice, Lily. I won't force you. If you want to return to your pack, confront your uncle, try to find another way. There's no other way, she said, and was surprised by the certainty in her own voice. If what you say is true, I've never had a place in Blackwood Pack. Just a role to play. A trap to spring. She moved toward him, toward the darkness, toward an uncertain future with a man she'd known for hours but felt she'd recognized across lifetimes. I choose you. I choose us. I choose whatever comes next, as long as we're facing it together. Zane's smile was sunrise breaking through storm clouds. Then let's finish what we started. They descended into the dark, and behind them, the mountain began to sing. The sanctuary was unlike anything Lily had imagined. Not a cave but a space between, existing in the heart of the mountain yet somehow outside normal geography. The walls glowed with soft bioluminescence, revealing carvings that moved and changed when viewed directly, telling stories in languages that bypassed her ears and wrote themselves directly into her understanding. She saw the history of the true alphas, their rise from ordinary wolves transformed by some ancient magic or evolutionary leap, their creation of the first packs, the first laws, the first bonds between wolf and human nature, their eventual fear of their own power, and the terrible decision to create the Devourer as control mechanism. And she saw the fall, the long centuries of hunting, the slow reduction of a proud lineage to scattered individuals hiding in shadows, until only Zane remained. It's beautiful, she whispered, though beautiful wasn't the right word. It was tragic. It was glorious. It was true in a way that made her own life feel like a shadow play. It's home, Zane said simply. The only one I've ever truly had. He led her to the center of the space, where a pool of liquid starlight rippled without wind. The bond must be completed here, in the heart of true alpha power. But Lily. He turned to face her, and she saw the fear and hope warring in his expression. Once we do this, there's no undoing it. We'll be connected in ways that transcend physical proximity, emotional distance, even death itself. You'll feel my pain as your own, my joy, my memories sometimes bleeding through, and you'll be bound to a war that predates your existence, hunted by an enemy that has never been defeated. He cupped her face in his hands, and she felt the tremor in his fingers, the centuries of loneliness making him desperate and terrified in equal measure. Are you sure? Lily thought of her uncle's betrayal, Caleb's cruelty, the life she'd almost settled for. She thought of the moment in the clearing when she'd first seen Zane, and something inside her had whispered finally. I'm sure, she said, and kissed him. The starlight rose to meet them. Part 4. The bond completed in waves. First came the physical. Lily felt Zane's body against hers with a sensitivity that transcended touch, every nerve ending singing with awareness of his warmth, his scent, the rhythm of his heart matching hers until she couldn't tell where she ended and he began. The starlight wrapped around them like a cocoon, and somewhere in the distance, she heard wolves howling. Not her pack, not any pack she knew, but the voices of true alphas past, welcoming a new bond into existence. Then came the emotional. Zane's feelings flooded through her. Not in overwhelming torrent, but in layered complexity that made her breath catch. She felt his awe at her acceptance, his terror of losing her, his guilt for pulling her into danger, and beneath it all, a love so vast and ancient it seemed to have its own gravity, pulling her into orbit around his soul. I'm sorry, his thought came gentle as breath. For the weight of this. For what I'm asking you to carry. Don't be, she responded and sent him her own feelings, the freedom of finally choosing her own path, the exhilaration of being truly seen, the certainty that whatever came, she would rather face it with him than safety without him. I've been waiting for this my whole life. I just didn't know what to call it. The third wave was power. It hit like lightning striking water. Every cell in Lily's body suddenly alive with energy that made her previous wolf strength feel like a candle flame compared to wildfire. She felt her wolf transform. Not change but awaken, becoming something more than it had been, connected to ancient lineages that predated her human existence. And she felt Zane's power, finally unleashed from the bonds of solitude and self-denial. It was terrifying in its scope, capable of reshaping mountains and commanding the very essence of what it meant to be wolf. But it was also wounded, scarred, incomplete from centuries of hiding. The bond helped, their connection providing stability and grounding that allowed him to access abilities long sealed away. But he was still diminished, still vulnerable. The Devourer knows, Zane thought, and she felt his sudden tension through their connection. Felt the bond complete. It's coming. How long? Minutes. Maybe less. He pulled back from their embrace, his eyes glowing silver with power that finally matched his true nature. We need to prepare. The sanctuary will shield us temporarily, but it can't hide us forever. The Devourer feeds on true alpha power. It will eventually break through any defense that contains what it hungers for. Lily forced her mind to practicalities, drawing on her training as a pack hunter despite the disorientation of her transformation. What are its weaknesses? How do we fight it? Zane moved to the wall of carvings, pressing his hand against specific symbols that began to glow with responsive light. The Devourer has no physical form. It exists as hunger, as absence, as the void where power used to be. It can't be wounded by claw or fang, can't be tracked by scent or sight. He turned to face her, and she saw the weight of centuries of failure in his eyes. But it can be filled. The resonance created by a complete true alpha bond generates energy faster than the Devourer can consume it. Serafina believed that if two bonded alphas could sustain the resonance long enough, they could overwhelm the Devourer's capacity, essentially satiating it to the point of destruction. Believed. She never completed the bond. Never got the chance to test the theory. He moved back to her, taking her hands. But we can. The bond is new, strong, fueled by both our energies. If we focus, project the resonance outward instead of containing it. It might work, Lily finished. Or it might just make us a bigger meal. Yes. He didn't try to sugarcoat the risk. But it's the only weapon we have. The only one any of us have ever had. The sanctuary shuddered. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the bioluminescent walls dimmed as something pressed against the boundaries of the space. It's here, they thought simultaneously, the bond making the warning instantaneous. Lily felt it then. Not with her enhanced senses, but with something deeper, something that existed in the space where her soul met Zane's. A hunger vast and ancient, pressing against the sanctuary's defenses like ocean against dam. It didn't have thoughts, not as she understood them, but it had purpose. Drive. The absolute certainty that true alpha power belonged to it, existed to feed it, and any who withheld that sustenance were crimes against its fundamental nature. Focus on me, Zane commanded, his voice carrying the full weight of his true rank. On the bond. On what we are together versus what we are apart. The resonance builds from connection. Every memory we share, every emotion we exchange, every piece of ourselves we offer freely. Lily closed her eyes and reached through their bond, not just accepting Zane's presence but actively embracing it. She showed him her childhood, lonely and determined, always striving for approval that never quite came. She showed him her first shift, the terror and ecstasy of becoming wolf. She showed him the night her parents died, the void where memory should be, the questions she'd learned not to ask. And in return he showed her his own memories. The golden cord of true alphas destroyed in a single night. The centuries of running, each hiding place eventually found, each ally eventually lost. The slow erosion of hope, the decision to become nobody rather than die somebody. They stood in the center of the sanctuary, surrounded by the history of his kind, and built between them a bridge of shared understanding that glowed with increasing brightness. The Devourer pressed harder. The walls began to crack. More, Zane urged. It has to be enough to overwhelm. We have to give everything. Lily understood what he was asking. The resonance required total vulnerability, hiding nothing, holding nothing back. Every fear, every shame, every dark corner of their souls laid bare and offered as fuel. She thought of her uncle's betrayal, the knowledge that her entire life had been manipulation, the hatred she'd felt, the desire for revenge, the shameful wish that she'd been ordinary, unremarkable, safe. She offered it all. Zane met her with his own darkness. The times he'd considered surrender, letting the Devourer take him simply to end the loneliness. The anger he'd harbored against his own kind for creating the weapon that destroyed them. The pride that had kept him hidden when he might have fought, might have saved others if he'd been willing to risk himself. The resonance blazed between them, visible now. A column of silver light that pushed against the sanctuary's ceiling and floor, seeking escape. The Devourer screamed. A soundless vibration that shook the foundation of the mountain. It recognized the threat, understood that this was different from previous encounters, and its hunger shifted to something like fear. Now Zane thought, we have to release it now while it's uncertain. But before they could act, the sanctuary's defenses shattered. Not from the Devourer, from outside. From the tunnel above, where Caleb's voice rang out with triumphant malice. Found them. The Hermit's little love nest. Silver light flooded the space. Artificial, chemical, burning against Lily's enhanced senses. Wolfsbane grenades, military grade, enough to incapacitate an entire pack. She felt Zane's power flicker as the poison touched him. Felt their resonance stutter and dim. No, she gasped, trying to hold the connection. But Caleb was descending into the sanctuary with a squad of armed enforcers, their weapons trained on Zane with professional precision. Impressive, Caleb drawled, though his eyes were wide with something that might have been fear beneath the gloating. Very impressive. I didn't think the Hermit had it in him. But then I didn't think dear cousin Lily had such hidden depths either. He circled them, keeping a careful distance from the still glowing resonance. The Devourer will be pleased. 2 true alphas for the price of, well, 1.5, I suppose. You're not fully transformed yet, are you, Lily? The bond changes the human partner, but it takes time. Days usually. Weeks for the full transformation. He stopped before Zane, close enough to touch, and Lily saw the hatred naked on his face. You thought you were so special. So above pack law, pack structure, pack power. But you're just fuel. Just food for the real master. And now you'll watch your precious mate die first, knowing that you failed again, that everyone you ever loved. Zane moved. Even weakened by wolfsbane, even distracted by maintaining the bond, he was still true alpha. His hand closed around Caleb's throat with speed that made the enforcer's guns useless, too close for safe firing, too fast for human reflexes. You know nothing of love, Zane said. His voice resonant with power that made the remaining carvings blaze in response. Nothing of sacrifice. You've served a monster for scraps of power, and you think that makes you strong. Caleb's face purpled, but his smile remained. Strong enough to know. You won't kill me. He gasped the words, but his certainty was chilling. You need me. Need to know. What else? The Devourer has planned. Need to know how deep the rot goes in your precious packs. Lily felt Zane's conflict through their bond, the desire to crush this puppet, this traitor warring against the practical need for information, for advantage, for any edge against an enemy that had never been defeated. He's right, she thought, hating the truth of it. We need to know what we're facing. How many packs have been compromised? Whether there's any alliance to be found. Zane's grip loosened fractionally, enough for Caleb to draw breath. Smart girl, the traitor wheezed. Always was. The practical one. Pity. You chose the wrong side. The right side, Lily said, moving to stand beside Zane, their resonance flaring brighter as they stood together. Is the one that doesn't feed its own people to ancient horrors. How many, Caleb? How many packs serve the Devourer? Caleb's smile was all teeth. Enough. More every year. The old ways are dying, cousin. The true alphas are extinct. He glanced at Zane. Or nearly so. The future belongs to those who adapt, who make deals with power rather than being consumed by it. The Devourer will consume you too, Zane said. Eventually. When there's nothing else left to feed it. Perhaps. Caleb shrugged, or tried to with Zane's hand still at his throat. But I'll have centuries of power first. Immortality, did you know? That's what it offers its faithful servants. Not the parody of long life you true alphas settle for, but true immortality. Eternal youth. Eternal strength. Lily felt Zane's disgust through their bond, and shared it. At what price? Eternal hunger? Eternal servitude? You're not immortal, Caleb. You're just a slower meal. Words. Caleb's eyes gleamed with fanatic light. Words from the losing side. The Devourer is here, in case you hadn't noticed. It followed me, as it always does when I lead it to prey. And with your little light show disrupting the sanctuary's shields. He gestured upward, where the darkness was indeed pressing closer, hungry and vast. He's stalling, Zane realized. Keeping us talking while the Devourer breaks through. Then we stopped talking. They moved as one, the bond-making coordination instantaneous. Zane threw Caleb toward his enforcers with enough force to send them all sprawling, while Lily reached for the resonance they'd built, shaping it with instinct she didn't know she possessed into a blade of pure light. She struck at the darkness above, not the Devourer itself but the weakness Caleb's entrance had created, sealing the breach with energy that screamed through her veins like lightning. The Devourer howled, retreating momentarily, and the sanctuary's walls began to repair themselves, slowly, painfully. But they were trapped. Caleb and his enforcers recovered quickly, surrounding them in a loose circle, weapons ready. Above, the Devourer circled, patient and eternal. And the resonance, that precious weapon they built, was fading. Too much energy spent on defense, not enough remaining for offense. Stalemate, Caleb observed, wiping blood from his mouth. For now. But you can't stay in here forever. And the moment you step out. He smiled. Well, the Devourer is very hungry. It doesn't like being denied its meal. Lily felt despair trying to take root and fought it. There has to be another way. Another exit. Something in the carvings, the history. There is, Zane thought, and she felt his reluctance, his fear of what he was about to suggest. A path. But it's dangerous. More dangerous than facing the Devourer directly. What is it? The place between. Where the sanctuary exists. True alphas could travel there once, step outside normal space, move between locations instantaneously. But it requires complete trust, complete merging of our bond. We would become temporarily one being. One consciousness. Lily understood the risk. If their connection wasn't strong enough, if there was any hesitation or hidden reservation, they could lose themselves entirely. Two minds becoming one, never separating, a single entity wearing two bodies. Or worse, Zane confirmed. Lost in the between. Forever falling. Forever searching for solid ground that doesn't exist. Do you trust me? She asked. With everything I am. Everything I was. Everything I might become. Then I trust you too. They turned to face each other, ignoring Caleb's confused shouts, ignoring the enforcer's weapons, ignoring the Devourer's pressing hunger. The world narrowed to the space between their eyes, the connection that had transformed from stranger to mate in less than a day. Together they thought. And stepped. The between was madness. Lily had expected darkness or light, or some comprehensible environment. Instead she found herself everywhere and nowhere, every when and now hen. Her sense of self stretching across infinite possibilities while simultaneously compressing to a single point of awareness. She was Zane. She was Lily. She was the bond between them, the space where two became one and one became many. She saw his memories from the inside. Felt his mother's love, his father's pride, the devastation of their loss with an intimacy that made her soul weep. And she felt him seeing her own memories, her own wounds, her own stubborn hope that had kept her moving forward when logic demanded surrender. Stay focused, Zane's voice came from everywhere. Or from inside her own mind, indistinguishable. We need a destination. A place of safety, of power, where we can recover and plan. The Blackwood territory, Lily thought, and felt his surprise. Not the Packlands, the old places, where my parents died. If Caleb serves the Devourer, if my uncle is compromised, then that's where the answers are. That's where we end this. Lily, I know. It's probably a trap. It's definitely dangerous. But it's also where I was meant to be, Zane. Where this all started. Where my parents tried to fight and failed. I need to know what they knew. I need to finish what they started. She felt his acceptance, his trust in her instincts even when they led toward danger. Together then. To the end. They found the exit like swimmers surfacing from deep water, breaking through into reality with a gasp that was shared between two bodies. They stumbled, separated but still connected, finding their balance in a landscape that Lily recognized with painful familiarity. The clearing where her parents had died. Where, according to Zane, they had probably been fighting the Devourer, trying to protect their daughter from a fate they'd glimpsed in prophecy or warning. The place was wrong. The trees were twisted into shapes that hurt to look at, their branches reaching toward a sky that was too dark, too starless. The ground beneath their feet was ash and bone, though no fire had ever burned here according to official records. And in the center of the clearing, waiting with patient hunger, was the Devourer. Not formless now. It had shaped itself from the remains of its previous meals, creating a body from absence and memory, and the essence of wolves who had died screaming. It wore her mother's face or something close to it, and when it spoke, the voice was her father's. Lily, it said, and smiled with too many teeth. We've been waiting for you. Part 5. The thing wearing her mother's face was not her mother. Lily knew this with absolute certainty, even as every instinct screamed at her to run to it, to accept the embrace it offered, to surrender to the illusion of finally, being reunited with the family she'd lost. But the bond with Zane anchored her, his presence in her mind a steady reminder of what was real, what was true, what was worth fighting for. You're not her, she said, and her voice was steady despite the tears streaming down her face. You're nothing. Absence pretending to be presence. Hunger wearing stolen skin. The Devourer's smile widened, stretching its borrowed face in ways that human muscles couldn't achieve. Clever girl. Cleverer than she was at the end. She thought she could hide you. Thought that if she sacrificed herself, gave herself to me completely, I would be satisfied. That I wouldn't notice the infant hidden in the roots, wrapped in warding spells and mother's love. She moved closer, and Lily felt Zane's power rising to meet the threat, their bond flaring with protective fury. But mother's love is such a delicious thing. So potent. It sustained me for years, gave me the strength to reach further, to touch more minds, to find the servants I needed to continue the hunt. Lily's blood ran cold. You kept her? Part of her. Keep is such a limited word. The Devourer gestured, and the ash beneath their feet stirred, revealing glimpses of what lay beneath. Bones, yes, but also something else. Memory made manifest. The preserved essence of every wolf it had consumed, still conscious, still suffering, fuel for its endless hunger. I am her. I am all of them. We are together forever. In the dark where nothing ends and nothing begins. Would you like to join us, daughter? Your mother's voice is so tired. She would welcome the rest of your company. Zane stepped forward, placing himself between Lily and the monster. You can't have her. The bond is complete. She's beyond your reach. Is she? The Devourer's attention shifted, and Lily felt its focus like physical pressure, like being examined by something that saw through skin and bone to the core of what she was. The bond is new, fresh, strong, yes, stronger than any I've encountered since. It paused, and the face it wore flickered through dozens of expressions, settling finally on something ancient and sad. Since Seraphina. She almost succeeded, almost found the resonance that could destroy me. But she was alone at the end. Her mate died in the attempt to reach her. And alone she was simply more food. It turned fully to Zane, and its voice changed, becoming multiple voices, a chorus of the consumed. You know this, child of the first. You know that your kind created me to control each other, and that I outgrew my purpose. You know that every attempt to destroy me has failed, that every weapon forged against me has become part of my arsenal. What makes you think this time will be different? Zane's hand found Lily's, their fingers intertwining with desperate strength. Because I'm not trying to destroy you alone. Because the bond between us isn't just power, it's choice. Free will. The thing you can never understand because you consume without consent, take without giving, exist only through the destruction of others. He squeezed Lily's hand, and she felt his plan forming through their connection. Not fully formed, desperate and risky, but possible. Just possible. The resonance Seraphina discovered, he continued, drawing the Devourer's attention, keeping it focused on him while Lily followed his unspoken instructions, reaching through their bond to touch something deeper, something that had been awakened by their union. It doesn't destroy you by overwhelming your hunger. It destroys you by offering you something you can't consume. Something that grows faster than you can eat, that feeds on connection rather than destroying it. Impossible. But the Devourer's voice had changed, uncertainty creeping into the chorus. Everything can be consumed. Everything returns to the dark eventually. Not love, Lily said, and she felt it then. The deep well of emotion that their bond had tapped, not just between her and Zane but extending outward, touching the preserved essences of the Devourer's victims, offering them something they hadn't felt in decades or centuries or however long they'd been trapped. Not choice. Not the willing sacrifice of two people who choose each other, who choose to face the dark together rather than alone. She reached out with her new power, with the true alpha energy that flowed through her transformed soul, and she touched the fragment of her mother that still existed within the Devourer's mass. Mom, she thought, pouring every memory she had into the contact, the warmth of being held, the sound of lullabies half remembered, the security of love that had been real, that had been given freely before it was stolen. I'm here. I'm alive. And I love you. The Devourer screamed. Not in pain, in confusion, in disruption, in the first real threat to its existence it had encountered in millennia. The face it wore flickered, her mother's features struggling to emerge, to respond, to choose against the hunger that had imprisoned them all. No, the monster roared, and the clearing shook with its fury. You are mine. All of you mine forever. You cannot. Lily. The thought was faint, fragmented, but unmistakably her mother's. My baby. My brave, beautiful girl. Mom, I need you to fight. To remember who you were, what you chose. You didn't sacrifice yourself for nothing. You bought me time. You gave me a chance. And now I need you to help me end this. The Devourer's form was destabilizing. The borrowed faces of its victims flickering as they remembered themselves, remembered choice, remembered love. Lily felt others joining the struggle. Seraphina, reaching through the connection Zane had maintained with his mentor. Zane's own parents awakened by their son's presence. Hundreds of others, thousands, a legion of the consumed finally given hope of escape. But the Devourer was ancient and cunning. Even as its form destabilized, it struck back, not at Lily or Zane, but at the bond itself, sending tendrils of negation into the space between them, seeking to sever the connection that threatened its existence. It knows, Zane realized. It knows that without the bond the resonance fails. Without each other we're just more food. Then we hold on, Lily responded, and she felt his agreement, his absolute commitment to this moment, this choice, this love that had transformed them both. They stood in the ash of her parents' final stand, surrounded by the faces of the consumed, and they refused to let go. The Devourer pressed harder, and Lily felt their bond straining, felt the temptation to release, to save herself, to survive even if it meant losing him. It was the same choice her mother had faced, the same sacrifice that had preserved her life at the cost of everything else. But she was not her mother. And Zane was not her father, sacrificing alone against impossible odds. Together they thought, and the resonance blazed anew, not just between them but through them, touching every trapped soul the Devourer held, offering freedom, offering peace, offering the choice that had been denied them. One by one the consumed began to release. Not destroyed, freed. Their essences, no longer trapped by hunger and despair, began to dissipate, to move on, to find whatever waited beyond the dark the Devourer had made. Seraphina's voice whispered gratitude as she finally found rest. Zane's parents embraced their son one last time before fading into light. And Lily's mother. Be happy, she thought, clear and strong and free at last. Be happy, my darling. Be loved. Be everything I couldn't be. Mom, I'll always be with you. Not trapped, not consumed, but in your heart, in your choices, in the love you've found. That's how love works, Lily. That's how we win. And then she was gone, truly gone. Not destroyed but released. And Lily felt the grief and the joy merge into something that powered the resonance beyond anything they'd achieved before. The Devourer collapsed. Not destroyed, diminished, reduced, its power scattered by the mass exodus of its victims. It tried to flee, to retreat into the dark between spaces where it had been born. But Zane was ready. With the last of his strength, he sealed the clearing, trapping the diminished monster in physical form for the first time in its existence. It lay before them, no longer wearing her mother's face, no longer anything but a writhing mass of darkness and desperate hunger, pathetic almost in its reduction. What? Its voice was faint, confused, like a child waking from nightmare. What are you? Lily looked at Zane, at the man who had been nobody and was now her everything, and she smiled through her tears. We're the future, she said. And you're the past. Finally finished. She raised her hand, and the resonance gathered, ready to deliver the final blow. Wait. Caleb's voice, ragged and desperate. They turned to find him at the edge of the clearing, alone. His enforcers fled or consumed in the chaos. Wait, you can't. If you destroy it, you destroy me. The connection, the power it gave me, I can't survive without. Then you die, Zane said without cruelty. As you would have died eventually, serving a master that consumes everything in the end. But I can help you. Caleb fell to his knees, all arrogance stripped away, revealing the terrified boy beneath the monster's servant. I know things. Other servants, other packs, the network the Devourer built over centuries. You need that information. We need, Lily said, to end this. Here. Now. And you need to face the consequences of your choices. She looked at Zane, and through their bond they made the decision together. Not vengeance, justice. Not destruction, freedom. The resonance descended, not as weapon but as transformation, touching the Devourer's diminished form and changing it, sealing away its hunger, its power, its very nature as predator, leaving behind only potential, possibility, the chance to become something else. And Caleb, connected to it, felt the change as well. He screamed as the borrowed power left him, as the immortality he had traded his soul for dissolved into nothing. But he didn't die. He simply became ordinary. A wolf without special strength, without influence, without the protection of ancient evil. You'll face your pack's justice, Zane told him. Human law if they prefer. But you'll live. You have the chance we never had, to rebuild, to redeem, to choose differently. Caleb wept, but he didn't argue. Perhaps in the end some part of him was relieved. The clearing was quiet. The ash was settling, and in the east, the first hint of dawn was lightening the sky. Lily felt exhaustion crashing over her, the aftermath of power spent and emotions overwhelmed. But through it all the bond remained, steady, warm, present. We did it, she whispered. We started it, Zane corrected, pulling her close. The Devourer is sealed, not destroyed. Its servants remain, though leaderless. And the world? He looked around at the twisted trees, the devastated landscape, the first hints of normalcy returning. The world will need to know. Need to change. The old ways, the pack structures built on dominance and fear, they enabled this. Allowed the Devourer to hide in plain sight, to recruit from those dissatisfied with their place in the hierarchy. Lily nodded, understanding. We need to build something new. Something better. Together. Always. They kissed as the sun rose, and for the first time in centuries, the true alpha lineage had a future. Part 6. The dawn that should have brought victory instead brought ash. Lily felt it first through the bond. A sudden coldness where warmth had been. A silence where Zane's constant mental presence had resided. She turned to find him staring at his hands, watching as the silver luminescence that had marked his true alpha power flickered and dimmed. Zane. She reached for him, but he stepped back, his expression unreadable. It's not stable, he said, and his voice was hollow. The resonance. We pushed too hard. Used too much. The power I sealed away for centuries, the abilities I relied on to survive, they're burning out. Fast. Lily felt panic rising, forced it down. Then we rest. Recover. The bond. The bond is what's killing me. He finally met her eyes, and she saw the truth there, terrible and absolute. Don't you feel it? The way our connection is fighting to maintain itself against the damage I took in the between? Every moment we stay linked, you're sustaining me. Pouring your energy into a vessel that's cracked beyond repair. She did feel it now that he named it. The slow drain, the way her new strength was flowing into him and disappearing into nothingness. The bond had become a chain, anchoring them both to a sinking ship. No. She grabbed his hands, refusing to let him retreat. We find another way. There has to be. There isn't. His smile was gentle, heartbreaking. I've lived centuries, Lily. I've seen every healing, every restoration, every desperate attempt to cheat death. This isn't injury. This is expiration. The true alpha power was never meant to be sealed so long, suppressed so completely. I kept it alive through sheer will, and now that will is finished. He cupped her face, his fingers trembling. But I'm not afraid. For the first time since I was a boy in my mother's arms, I'm not afraid. Because I found you. Because we did what none of my kind ever managed, we fought the Devourer and won. We freed them, Lily. My parents. Your mother. Everyone who was lost. They're at peace because of us. Without you. The words tore from her throat. I can't do this without you. I won't. You can. He pressed his forehead to hers, and she felt his love through the bond, pure and undiminished even as his power failed. Your true alpha now fully transformed. The bond completed the change. You have everything you need to build the future we talked about. The new pack structures. The warning against the servants who remain. The hope that things can be different. Alone. Never alone. He kissed her soft and final. I'll be in the bond, Lily. In every memory, every moment of connection. And when you find someone worthy, someone who can see you as I did, who can stand beside you as an equal. Stop. She pulled back, tears blinding her. Don't you dare tell me to move on. Don't you dare. The ground shook. Not the Devourer. It was sealed, diminished, no longer a threat. This was something else. Something that made the newly healed clearing tremble with familiar dread. Lily spun, reaching for power that answered sluggishly, depleted by the fight and by sustaining Zane. Caleb laughed. He shouldn't have been able to laugh, kneeling in the ash stripped of his borrowed power. But the sound was real, and it was triumphant. You think it's over? He rose and she saw that while the Devourer's power had left him, something else remained. Something deeper. Older. You think destroying my master frees you? I've served it for 20 years, cousin. I know its secrets, its contingencies, the promises it made for exactly this possibility. He raised his hands and the ash stirred, responding to words in a language that made Lily's bones ache. The Devourer doesn't die. Disperses. Seeds itself into every servant, every connection, every drop of power ever exchanged. And when the host is destroyed, he smiled, and his eyes began to glow with familiar hunger. We become the new vessel. We become the hunger. Zane moved, faster than he should have been able, placing himself between Lily and the transforming Caleb. But his strength was gone, his power flickering, and Caleb, no, the thing wearing Caleb's skin, brushed him aside like paper. Two true alphas, it said, and its voice was the Devourer's chorus, Caleb's consciousness already being consumed. One dying. One newborn. Perfect balance. Perfect sustenance. Lily caught Zane as he fell, felt his weight in her arms, his breath shallow and slowing. The Devourer Caleb advanced and she had nothing left. No power, no plan, no hope. I love you, Zane whispered, and his eyes closed. And Lily Hart, who had spent her entire life being practical, being cautious, being smart about which battles to fight, made a choice that was none of those things. She opened the bond completely. Not just connection merging. She poured herself into Zane, every memory, every emotion, every piece of her soul that had finally learned to hope, to trust, to love without reservation. She gave him everything, holding nothing back, and in doing so she offered the Devourer exactly what it wanted. A meal too large to consume. The thing in Caleb's form hesitated, sensing the trap but not understanding it. It reached for the flood of power and essence Lily was releasing, and found itself caught, drowning in an ocean of connection that regenerated faster than it could devour. What? It choked, the chorus confused. This isn't, you can't. Love, Lily thought, and she wasn't alone. Zane was with her, consciousness revived by her sacrifice. Their merged selves more than the sum of their parts. It's not power you can eat. It's not energy you can drain. It's choice and connection, and the infinite regeneration of two people who refused to let each other go. They stood together in one body or two. The distinction had ceased to matter. The Devourer Caleb writhed, overwhelmed, its borrowed form destabilizing as the hunger that defined it encountered something that simply wouldn't diminish. You created us, they told it, voice resonant with doubled power. You forced our kind to hide, to diminish, to seal away our true nature. And in doing so, you ensured that when we finally emerged, finally connected, finally loved without fear, we would be more than you could ever consume. The Caleb form screamed, and the scream was the Devourer's defeat, its essence being forced out, dispersed, scattered so widely that it would take centuries to coalesce again, if ever. When silence returned, they found themselves still standing, still merged, still more than either had been alone. Slowly, carefully, they began to separate. Lily finding her own boundaries, Zane reclaiming his individual self. But something had changed. The bond, rather than fading with their separation, had transformed. It was no longer a connection between two people, but a foundation. A wellspring. A source that renewed itself endlessly through the very act of being shared. You're alive, Lily whispered, touching his face, his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady. We're alive, Zane corrected, wonder in his voice. And we're different. More. He looked at his hands and the silver luminescence had returned, brighter, steadier, infused with something new. Something that hummed with Lily's essence as much as his own. The bond didn't just save me, he realized. It transformed us both. We're not true alpha and mate anymore, Lily. We're something new. Partners in power. Equal in a way my kind never achieved. They held each other as the sun finally cleared the horizon, warming the ash of the clearing into something that might, eventually, support life again. But even as relief flooded through them, Lily felt the weight of what came next. Caleb was dead. Truly dead. The Devourer's last emergence consuming what remained of him. Her uncle waited in Blackwood territory, unaware that his treachery was exposed, and the network of servants the Devourer had built over centuries still existed, still worked its corruption in packs across the world. The war was far from over, but they had won the first battle, and they had won it together. Part 7. They walked back to Blackwood territory hand in hand, no longer hiding, no longer diminished. The forest recognized them, bowed to them, whispered their joined name through root and branch. Lily felt the eyes of the pack before they reached the borders. Word had spread. Caleb's departure with enforcers, the strange energy from the deep woods, the dawn that had come wrong and righted itself. They were watched from shadows, from treetops, from the safe distance of those who sensed power they didn't understand. Your uncle will know we're coming, Zane said. He'll have prepared. Let him. Lily's voice was steady, resonant with the new power flowing through her. Let him see what his schemes have created, what his betrayal has cost. They found Elias Blackwood in the Great Hall, surrounded by his remaining advisors, his guards, his symbols of authority. He looked older than Lily remembered, or perhaps she was simply seeing him clearly for the first time, seeing the fear beneath the dominance, the desperation beneath the control. Lily. He stood, attempting the familiar posture of paternal authority. You've returned. And brought a guest. Zane, she said, and let the name carry weight. True Alpha. My mate. The one you and your son tried to deliver to the Devourer. The silence was absolute. She watched the color drain from her uncle's face, watched his hands tremble before he controlled them. I don't know what you've been told. The truth. Lily advanced, feeling Zane's presence at her back, his power complementing hers without dominating. About my parents. About the deal you made to save yourself. About raising me not out of obligation but as bait. As insurance. As a tool to be used when the opportunity arose. She stopped before him, close enough to touch, and let her transformed nature show in her eyes. The gold of her wolf merged with the silver of true alpha power, a combination that had never existed before. You were right to fear me, she said softly, but wrong about why. I never wanted your position, your authority, your pack. I wanted family. I wanted to belong. And you gave me neither, because you were too busy serving a monster to remember what it meant to be human. Elias collapsed back into his seat, all pretense of authority stripped away. It wasn't. I didn't have a choice. When they came, when they showed me what the Devourer could do, what it would do if I refused. There are always choices, Zane said, and his voice carried the weight of centuries spent hiding, surviving, refusing to surrender despite impossible odds. You chose yourself over your sister, your son over your niece, your power over your pack. And now you face the consequences. Lily looked at the advisors, the guards, the wolves who had followed her uncle because they knew no alternative. She saw fear, confusion, but also hope. The same hope she'd felt when Zane first looked at her like she mattered. The Devourer is sealed, she announced, loud enough for all to hear. Its servants remain, but their master is powerless for the first time in millennia. The old ways, the dominance games, the hierarchy built on fear and control, those were its tools. Its means of finding the desperate, the dissatisfied, the ones who would trade anything for power. She turned slowly, meeting as many eyes as she could. We offer something different. Partnership. True connection. The strength that comes from choice rather than compulsion. Zane and I are building a new pack, open to any who want to learn a better way. And Blackwood territory? One of the advisors asked, voice careful. Remains under Elias's control for now. Lily watched her uncle's surprise, understood it, and felt nothing but pity. He's not evil, just weak. And weakness can be healed if there's will to change. But we're watching. We're connected to this land now through what we fought here. We'll know if the old ways return. She stepped back, taking Zane's hand. The choice is yours. All of you. Stay and change or leave and find your own path. But the age of the Devourer is ending. The age of true alphas working together, equals in power and respect, is beginning. They turned to leave, but Elias's voice stopped her. Lily, your parents, at the end, did they suffer? She looked back at the man who had betrayed her family, who had used her entire life, and found that she could answer with truth rather than vengeance. No, she said. They loved. They chose. They saved me. And in the end they found peace. More than you have, I think. More than you will, until you face what you've done and choose differently. Then she walked out, into the sunlight, into the future. Into the life she had never imagined but would never trade. Zane was quiet as they left Blackwood lands, following the pull of the mountain sanctuary that had become their true home. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful. You could have taken the territory. The pack destroyed him as he tried to destroy you. I know. Why didn't you? Lily stopped, turning to face him, this man who had taught her what power truly meant. Because that's the old way. The Devourer's way. Power taken through fear, maintained through control. I want to build something that doesn't need enemies to exist. Something that grows stronger through connection rather than domination. She touched his face, feeling the bond between them hum with agreement. Besides, we have more important work. The servants who remain. The packs corrupted by the old system. The children who need to know there's another way to be strong. Together, he said. Always. They kissed in the morning light, and the forest sang around them, welcoming the new guardians of an ancient power finally being used as it was meant, as foundation for love rather than weapon for war. The turning point had passed. The darkest hour was behind them. And ahead, infinite with possibility, stretched the future they would build together. Part 8. The mountain sanctuary had become something more than shelter. In the weeks since the Devourer's defeat, Lily and Zane had worked tirelessly, transforming the ancient space into a beacon. Word spread through channels both traditional and mystical. Packs suffering under corrupt leadership, young wolves chafing against dominance hierarchies, even humans with the wolf gene who had never known their heritage, all finding their way to the Weeping Stone. Now, as the full moon rose over their first official gathering, Lily felt the weight of what they'd built. 37 wolves from 12 different packs stood in the clearing below, representing a cross-section of the werewolf world that had never before existed in one place without bloodshed. They're afraid, Zane murmured beside her, his hand finding hers with the ease of habit and the intimacy of destiny. Every dominant instinct is screaming at them to establish hierarchy, to fight for position, to create the structure they know. And we have to show them there's another way. Lily squeezed his fingers, drawing strength from their bond. The resonance isn't just for fighting devourers. It's for building connection. For proving that strength doesn't require submission from others. They descended together, and the gathering fell silent. 37 pairs of eyes watched them approach. Some hopeful, some suspicious, some openly hostile. Welcome, Zane said, and his voice carried the authority of centuries without the compulsion of dominance. You've come because you sense that the old ways are ending, because you felt the change in the power that flows through our world, the opening of possibilities that didn't exist before. A large male from the northern pack stepped forward, his posture aggressive despite the neutral ground. We've come to see if the rumors are true, if the true alpha has actually found a way to share power rather than hoard it. His eyes raked over Lily with assessment that made Zane's hand tighten, and to see if his equal is truly partner or merely pet. Lily felt the challenge, the old pattern trying to reassert itself. She stepped forward alone, releasing Zane's hand, and let her power show, not in display but in presence. The gold and silver of her eyes, the steadiness of her stance, the absolute confidence of someone who had faced the Devourer and won. I am Lily Hart, she said, and her voice resonated with the mountain's own frequency. Formerly of Blackwood Pack, where I was valued for my utility and controlled for my potential. I am true alpha now, transformed by bond and choice rather than bloodline. And I am no one's pet. She circled the challenger, not threatening, simply demonstrating. You want to test me. You want to see if this partnership is real. If power can truly be shared without diminishing either holder. I understand. I would have done the same once. She stopped before him, close enough to touch. But consider this. Every moment you spend testing, challenging, proving dominance, is a moment not spent building. Not spent learning. Not spent becoming more than your instincts demand. The male. She learned his name was Thorn, leader of a disaffected faction from the Ice River Pack, held her gaze for a long moment. Then slowly something shifted in his expression. Not submission. Recognition. You speak like someone who's lost everything and found better, he said quietly. I have. She smiled, and it transformed her face from warrior to welcome. And I'm offering you the chance to do the same. Not by following me. By joining me. By building with me. Thorn looked past her to Zane, then to the other gathered wolves, then back to her. Show me, he said. Show me this resonance. This connection. Prove it's not just pretty words. Zane moved to stand beside her, not before, not behind. Together, they reached for the bond that had become their foundation, and let it manifest visibly, a weaving of gold and silver light that surrounded them both, that extended tendrils toward the gathered wolves without forcing, without compelling, simply offering. Touch it, Lily invited. Any who wish. Feel what partnership truly means. Thorn was first, reaching into the light with tentative fingers. His eyes widened, and she felt his surprise through the resonance, surprise at the lack of demand, the absence of dominance, the pure generosity of connection that asked nothing and offered everything. It's. He struggled for words, and she saw moisture in his eyes that he quickly blinked away. It's like being seen. Truly seen. For the first time. One by one the others reached in. The resonance grew with each connection, not diminishing but multiplying, creating a network of light that linked every wolf present in a web of mutual recognition. Dominants and submissives, alphas and omegas, traditional enemies and strangers, all found themselves joined in something unprecedented. This is the future, Zane said, his voice carrying across the clearing without effort. Not the erasure of difference, but the celebration of it. Not the elimination of strength, but its redirection toward common purpose. We are predators, yes. We are wolves. But we are also choice and connection, and the infinite capacity to become more than our nature demands. The gathering erupted, not in howls of dominance but in something new. A chorus of voices, distinct yet harmonious, acknowledging both individual power and collective purpose. But even as victory sang through her, Lily felt the warning through their extended network. A darkness at the edges, familiar and terrible. The servants, she thought to Zane. The remaining network. They found us. They were always going to find us, he responded, and she felt his calm determination. We knew this moment would come. The question is whether we've built enough, taught enough to face what they bring. The answer came in the sudden silence of the forest, the retreat of birds and small creatures, the pressure in the air that preceded storm. They came from all directions, wolves in human form, armed with silver and wolfsbane and something else, something that made the resonance flicker with recognition. The Devourer's taint. Not in one vessel now, but distributed, corrupted power shared among fanatics who preferred servitude to freedom. Thorn moved to Lily's side, and others followed, forming a circle around the sanctuary's heart. You taught us connection, he said. Let us show you what we've learned. The battle, when it came, was unlike any in werewolf history. No howls of individual challenge. No duels for dominance. The network of resonance that Lily and Zane had created allowed coordination that transcended verbal command. Each wolf knowing others' positions, needs, strengths, covering weaknesses before they could be exploited. Lily fought at the center, Zane beside her, their power feeding the network even as they used it. She saw Thorn take a silver blade meant for her, saw a young Omega from the southern marshes use her empathic gifts to disrupt the enemy's coordination, saw enemies pause, confused by opponents who fought not as individuals but as something greater. But the enemy had numbers, and they had the Devourer's taint, corruption that ate at the resonance, that tried to sever connections and isolate individuals for easier consumption. Lily felt it happening, felt the network straining, and made her choice. She reached deep into the bond, past the surface connection to the core where she and Zane had truly merged, and she pulled. Power flooded through her. Not just her own, not just Zane's, but the accumulated potential of every true alpha who had ever lived, every sacrifice made, every hope deferred. It was too much for one body, one mind, and she felt herself beginning to burn, to dissolve, to become simply light. Zane caught her. Not pulling back, not trying to diminish what she channeled, but joining her in it. Together they became the conduit, the transformer, the vessel that could hold what neither could manage alone. The resonance exploded outward, not as weapon but as transformation. It touched the enemy, not destroying them but offering choice. The same choice Caleb had been offered, that her uncle had been offered. Sever the taint, reject the hunger, find another way. Some accepted. She felt their release, their relief, their gratitude as the Devourer's corruption left them weakened but free. Others refused, clinging to the power they'd served even at the cost of themselves. These the resonance simply contained, isolated, held in stasis until they could be helped or, if necessary, permanently neutralized. When silence returned, the clearing held not victors and vanquished, but survivors. Wounded, transformed, exhausted survivors who had participated in something that would reshape their world. Lily collapsed against Zane, both of them trembling with aftermath, and felt the network settle into something permanent. Not a pack in the traditional sense. Something new. A coalition of choice, bound by resonance, dedicated to the future they'd nearly died to create. We did it, she whispered. We started it, he corrected, echoing words from what felt like lifetimes ago. The rest is the work of years, of generations, of everyone who chooses this path. They held each other as the moon reached its zenith, and for the first time in centuries, the true alpha power served not survival but hope. Part 9. 1 year later. The Weeping Stone had become a city, or the closest thing werewolf society had ever known. Buildings of living wood and stone spiraled up the mountain's flanks, connected by paths that responded to the resonance, shifting to accommodate need, rather than enforcing hierarchy. Lily stood on the highest platform, watching the sunset paint the world in shades of gold and crimson. Below she could hear the sounds of community. Children learning to shift with joy rather than fear, adults negotiating disputes through mediated connection rather than dominance challenges, the constant hum of a network that had grown to include hundreds of wolves across territories that no longer belonged to any single pack. Beautiful, isn't it? Zane's arms wrapped around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder, their bond singing with contentment that needed no words. They said it was impossible, she murmured, leaning back into his warmth. That wolves need hierarchy. That dominance and submission are in our blood, our bones, our souls. That without the old ways we'd tear ourselves apart. And we proved them wrong. He kissed her temple, her cheek, the corner of her smile. Not by denying our nature but by completing it. By adding choice to instinct, connection to power, love to survival. She turned in his arms, facing him fully. The scars he'd carried when they met had faded. Not erased but transformed. Marks of survival rather than suffering. Badges of a journey that had led him here. To her. To this. Do you ever miss it? She asked. The solitude? The simplicity of being nobody. He considered, honest as he always was. Sometimes. In quiet moments I remember the peace of having no expectations. No responsibilities. No one to disappoint but myself. His hands traced her spine, familiar and beloved. But then I remember the loneliness. The slow erosion of hope. The certainty that I would end as I began. Alone, unmourned, forgotten. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to the ring they'd exchanged not 3 months past. A symbol as much for the community as for themselves. And I choose this. Every moment, every challenge, every complication. I choose us. Even when I leave my socks on the floor. She teased, because they had built enough safety to be ridiculous, to be human, to be more than their legendary roles. Even then. He grinned, young and ancient in hers. Though I reserve the right to complain. Fair. They stood in silence, watching the stars emerge, feeling the network pulse with life and connection below. There was work still to do. Always work, always challenges. Always those who resisted change or sought to exploit the new system for old advantages. But they faced it together as partners, as equals, as the foundation of something that would outlast them both. Lily. Zane's voice had changed, carrying a weight of preparation. There's something I need to tell you. Something the mountain showed me this morning. In the deep places where the first true alpha lie recorded their visions. She turned to face him fully, reading his seriousness, feeling through their bond that this was important, was transformative, was next. The resonance we created, the network that binds our community. It's growing beyond us. Beyond wolves. Can feel. Others. Humans with latent potential. Other shifter species long hidden now reaching out. Even. He paused, searching for words. Even the land itself. The earth responding to connection rather than exploitation. He took both her hands and she felt his excitement, his hope, his absolute certainty that they were standing at the beginning of something vast. We didn't just build a new pack, my love. We started a transformation of what it means to have power, to use power to be powerful. And it's spreading. Slowly, unevenly, with resistance and setback, but spreading. Lily thought of her childhood. Of the desperate need to prove herself worthy of conditional acceptance. She thought of Zane's centuries of hiding, of diminishing, of being less than he was to survive. She thought of the clearing where her parents died. Now a garden where children played. Their laughter a rebuke to the darkness that had claimed the previous generation. Then we keep going, she said simply. We teach, we build, we connect. And we trust the network to carry what we've started beyond what we can imagine. Together. Always. They kissed as the stars wheeled overhead, and below them, in the city that shouldn't exist, a child began to cry, the first birth of the new year. The first generation born into a world where power meant partnership, where strength meant service, where love was the foundation rather than the exception. Lily felt the cry through the resonance, felt the parents' joy and exhaustion, felt the community's response of support and celebration. She felt Zane's hand in hers, his power complementing hers, his love surrounding her like the mountains surrounded their home. She had come to the woods a year ago seeking a rogue, proving herself to a family that had never truly been hers. She had found instead a destiny, a partner, a purpose that transformed everything she believed about strength and worth. She had thought him a nobody. He had been the true alpha, last of his kind, guardian of forgotten power. And together they had become something new, something more, something that would echo through generations as the moment everything changed. The story would be told, Lily knew. The legend would grow as legends do, embroidered and enhanced until the truth became myth. But the core would remain. That love, freely chosen and fully given, could transform even the darkest legacy. That two people who saw each other truly, and chose to stay despite the seeing, could reshape the world. She was Lily Hart, once of Blackwood Pack, now of nowhere and everywhere. She was true alpha, not by blood but by bond. She was loved and she loved, and in the end that was everything. Then, we made it. Party popper, oh my goodness, what a journey. From that mysterious first meeting in the woods to building an entirely new way of life for werewolves everywhere. Lily and Zane have been through absolute fire and come out forging something beautiful. I need to hear from you. What was your favorite moment of the entire story? The first meeting? The merging during the darkest hour? That final sunset scene? Drop it in the comments. Beach balloon. And if you cried during Lily's mom's final message. Yeah, me too. Loudly crying face that was hard to write, but so worth it for the healing it brought our girl. If this story touched your heart, if you lost yourself in these characters for hours, please hit that subscribe button. Your support means I can keep creating these long, immersive, emotional romances that you can sink into completely. Plus, you'll be the first to know when my next epic drops. What's next? I'm thinking we might explore Thorn's story, or maybe check in on what happened to Elias and whether he truly changed. Or maybe a whole new world entirely. Tell me what you want to see in the comments. Thank you for spending this time with me. Thank you for caring about these characters. Thank you for being part of this community. Until next time, beautiful souls. Keep choosing love, keep building connection, and remember, you are always enough, exactly as you are. Sparkling heart wolf face. Final question. Did this ending satisfy you? Give me a yes in the comments if you loved it. Backhand index pointing down.